In this YouTube video, we'll hear a statement from Cindy Beeman, another employee of Miss West, who will confirm, as Kathleen Francisco and Diane Stoner has in earlier videos, that Miss West is a tyrant that torments people, that abuses them mentally and physically, tries to break their spirit and force them into her cult, where they just become mindless droids, envelope stuffers, or if they're wealthy people, they're separated from their bank accounts and then discarded like used Kleenex. As before, the numbers prior to each segment of the recording relate to the numbers on the index shown on the screen above.
Okay, my name is Cindy Beeman. I've given John Watson permission to record this conversation.
Thank you.
And his lawyer has access to it for whatever use she needs.
Okay, wonderful. How long did you work for? Divine Unity, was it, or SAI, or?
Actually, I started with Divine Unity on May 19th of 2003.
Right.
And terminated my employment on October 1st.
You terminated the employment?
Well, I just chose not to go back after my check had a problem clearing.
Quit under duress.
But it was finally the straw that broke the camel's back. And
the check bouncing was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, and I just didn't feel like I needed to go back and take any more abuse, and so I just chose not to return.
Okay. What was your job there, Cindy?
My job title was conference manager.
Right.
But I did everything from the reception work, answering the phone, doing that sort of thing, to scrubbing toilets.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And how did you feel that you were abused? What was the kind of behavior that was leveled at you?
Well, at first, they seemed very joyful that I was there. And that lasted, I think the honeymoon lasted about 2 weeks. And actually, after the first 2 weeks I was there were an absolute living hell because it was during an event. And having not had any exposure to any of their events before, and Anne had been there, and they terminated her.
This is Anne Stout.
Anne Stout.
Yes.
And they terminated her the day I started.
Wow.
Without notice.
Yes.
The phone calls from Devra, that the mood swings that she would have. One day she would tell you one thing, the next day she would tell you another, and she would call you and just holler at you over the phone and make you feel really stupid. You know, you just had to figure out what you were supposed to do and do it the best way that you knew how. And it wasn't like I came in as a blank slate. No. You know, I'd had 25 years of experience. Sure. So they didn't have an idiot sitting there.
No.
Although they tried to make you think you were.
Of course.
3.
But when you work someplace like there, and you work straight through, you get no breaks, you get no lunch break. It's against the law. And if you take a break for anything, you're expected to take that off your time card. Well, excuse me, that's just not appropriate.
No, it isn't.
And you're expected to eat at your desk, if you eat at all, and you better do it fast. That's no way to run a business.
It isn't.
And it's not good for morale.
No. Do you think they really care about employees and the law?
No, not at all. Not at all. They care only about themselves and what they can gain.
4.
Anne
Stout.
Yes.
And they terminated her the day I started without notice.
5.
But then when they brought Esther in from Atlanta, we all thought, boy, this is going to be great. She won't be sucked into all of this. And maybe we can get something done so that we could actually see projects finish.
Yes.
Instead of do this and then, oh no, we've changed our mind, redo it this way. or we're not going to do that now, so let's start on this one. And so you never saw anything through. But Esther wasn't there a week before Devra had her totally sucked in. I had never seen anything happen so fast with an intelligent woman in my whole life. Had her sucked in hook, line, and sinker.
So she'd lost her independence,
Totally.
her perspective.
Everything.
And now Devra was calling the tune, as she does with everyone anyway,
Exactly.
sooner or later, or they leave.
Yeah, and giving Esther the false sense of security that she was in some sort of power and could make decisions.
Yes.
Right. So she would make decisions and then, of course, get called on it every time. It's just like Kathleen being dismissed. I had a signed document, which I asked Diane to get, that Esther signed off on Kathleen being gone on Sunday and Monday.
Days off, yeah.
And Esther authorized it. But yet, when Devra found out about it, she threw a fit and fires Kathleen. And if you're coming from your truth, Esther should have stood up and said, I authorized this. But she didn't have the chutzpah to do that.
No, she was afraid.
She was very afraid.
She was afraid.
Because she had been called on the carpet a number of times. She spent the last week that I was there in tears most every day because the masters were talking to her and she was just getting all this information and she just couldn't process it. Well, excuse me. Devra was giving it to her over the phone from Israel. So
Devra does these, my experience and the experience of others is that Devra does these things to humiliate people.
Absolutely.
To make them believe that they're not worthy in some way, which makes it easy for her to manipulate them by basically knocking the stuffing out of them.
Right. Well, she kept calling me a victim, that I had to get over my victim scenario. Well, I've never considered myself a victim. I'm a survivor.
Sure.
But I'm not a victim.
She did it with everyone. I've seen Anne, who started at the same, just after I did, go from being a strong, confident businesswoman. I didn't see her towards the end, but I'm told she was basically a wreck.
Oh, she was.
6.
When I was originally approached about this job, I answered a blind ad. Ananda did the interview. We talked about salary. And I told her it would take $30,000 for me to come out there because there wasn't any reason for me to leave the job I had. That wasn't going to be a problem. So they offered me the job.
What about health insurance? Did they offer that too?
That would be forthcoming. They were working on it. Yeah. And so they offered me the job. And so I said, fine, I took it. I gave my notice. I went out for a training on an afternoon on my time, only to be told, well, we've decided that we can only pay you $24 because Devra has done a spin on it, and right now you are only worth $24,000 to us. Well, I've already quit my job.
This is the pattern that they use with everyone, I have to say.
So I was there. I mean, I didn't have a choice. I had quit my job. I needed the income. So I went to work for $24,000.
7.
And I said, Devra, you and I need to get something very clear. And we went over the whole scenario.
Did she listen to you? Did she allow you to speak?
She would interrupt. Trying to finish a sentence is not something that you can do there. And so when I left there, she was just hot. You know, she was angry. And she called Ananda and just lashed out. And everybody could hear it, you know, because when she yells, the phones rumble. So the whole thing was just a really bad experience. I would never use them as a reference.
8.
How would you characterize Devra West's mental behavior, her
She's a crazy woman.
approach to people?
Yeah, she's just crazy. She has a very high opinion of herself, which is inappropriate.
Did you hear her call herself as the Christ, God?
Oh, Yeah.
You know,
And, you know, the masters speak through her and all of her transmissions. And I sat in on a couple sessions and was taken aback by some of the things that went on and how she manipulated people, to the point where she became physical with them, knocking them in the back, knocking their knees out from under them and onto the floor.
You've seen her physically abuse people?
Yeah. Anandra especially. She came up behind Anandra during one session and whacked her in the middle of the back and then hit her behind her knees so that she went to the floor. So, and Anandra is her whipping post.
For sure.
And it's very sad. Very sad. And it needs to stop because people are getting abused.
They are.
On a daily basis, and they suck new people in.
As you heard from Cindy Beeman and Kathleen Francisco and Diane Stoner before Cindy, it was hell working for Miss West. You were called employees in name, but in reality you had been inducted into Miss West's cult, and the whole purpose of you being there was so that Miss West could break your spirit, break your personality, and then turn you into a droid, where you would work long hours of unpaid overtime, be an envelope stuffer, unless, of course, you were wealthy. Then Miss West would use her manipulative skills along with her occult skills to force the target to empty their bank accounts into hers. And then afterwards, if they go to the police or go to court, they would be subject to daily, nightly psychic attacks, being woken up at 3 a.m. every morning, headaches, violent headaches, migraines, partial paralysis down one side of their body, attacks to their eyes, to their vital organs, their heart, their stomach, their kidneys. The whistleblower's been on the receiving end of this for 8.5 years. We need to get this information out to as many people as possible to protect them from having to go through what these people have suffered. There are countless examples of Miss West committing serious crimes. We're talking theft, fraud, extortion, violent assaults, and even some suspicious deaths, which are obviously murders by her, but because of the weapon she uses, it cannot be traced back to her. So where there is a coroner who looks into the death, as was the case with young mother Lisa Swidler, who was a student who saw too much, tried to break away from the cult, 2 or 3 weeks later she was dead. She died of internal bleeding, but the coroner ruled it death by natural causes. What else would he rule it as? And even if we could prove it was Miss West who did it, which it obviously was, then the weapon she uses is not regarded under legal statute as a weapon. Shamanism is not regarded under legal statute as a weapon, which is why Miss West doesn't get prosecuted. In fact, the whole point of senior members of the cult, Jeffrey Reynolds, Jack West, and Dr. Julio Williams, is if these attacks, these crimes get out into the public, they then lie, make false statements, blame the victims for the fact that their bank accounts have been emptied by Miss West, blame the victims for being repeatedly beaten over the head with Miss West's shoe by Miss West. That's the victim's fault too. And it goes on, and it's been going on for decades. But enough is enough. In the next series of YouTube videos, what I'll be doing is making public the correspondence between the whistleblower and some of the other employees who were caught up inside Miss West's cult, some of whom, having seen the whistleblower's website prior to 2010, wrote to him asking for help. Please be sure to like my video and please help me make it go viral. Somebody's life may depend upon it. Thank you for watching.